The United Nations Security Council is to discuss Yemen crisis on Tuesday. The World Food Programme says that Yemen is on the brink of famine. Houthi militia targets a camp for displaced people in Taz. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaz Abdelbey. The UN Security Council will have a session tomorrow to discuss developments in Yemen in light of the military escalation and Houthi attacks on neighboring countries. It's expected that the open session will witness briefings on the political, military, and humanitarian situation and the crisis of Safer tanker. The Gulf Cooperation Council held the Iran-backed Houthi militia responsible for using civilians as human shields. The Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council called on the international community to use more pressure on the militia to engage seriously without preconditions in the political process sponsored by the United Nations to resolve the Yemeni crisis. Redesignating the Houthi militia as a terrorist group is an international as well as local demand in light of the violations made by the militia. This report has more details.
More than 90 local, regional and international civil society organizations have called on the United Nations General Assembly to classify the Houthi militia as a terrorist group. The organizations affirmed in a joint statement that the approach taken by the Houthi militia is a real danger to peace in Yemen, to building a modern Yemeni state, and a threat to international peace and security. They called on the international community to quickly classify the Houthi militia as a terrorist group, put it on international terrorism lists, and to place its leaders in front of the International Criminal Court. The joint statement indicated that the speedy response of the international community by classifying Houthis as the terrorist groups and prosecuting its leaders will contribute to the success of the policy of putting maximum pressure on the group to stop its crimes and will dry up its sources of support. It will also contribute to enhance peace opportunities and deliver humanitarian aid to those who deserve it. The statement stressed that the crimes that the Houthi group deliberately commits on a daily basis by bombing civilian objects and vital installations with ballistic missiles and drones, and the resulting killing and injuries to civilians are crimes that amount to be war crimes. The organizations denounced the silence of the international community on these crimes, calling on it to issue decisions to ensure that Houthis' crimes will not be repeated in the future. They in addition pointed out that the Houthi militia has caused the deterioration of the humanitarian situation, starting with the increase in the number of displacement in addition to the victims of mines. They also pointed out to the recruitment of children that is carried out by the militia. The Houthis had recruited more than 35,000 children since 2014. They used schools, mosques and summer camps to brainwash children, train them and send them to the fronts. The statement confirmed that the Houthi militia has turned airports into military barracks and ports into launching centers for operations targeting the security and safety of the international navigation, noting that the group has a black record of targeting international shipping lines, booby-trapping boats, attacking commercial and humanitarian ships.
The UN World Food Programme said rising food prices have pushed Yemenis into extreme poverty. This report has more details.
For 8 years now, Yemeni people have been suffering from food shortage and scarcity due to the ongoing war. The rising of prices and absence of paying wages at regular times have worsened the situation and is expected to involve Yemeni people in famine danger, which would be difficult to overcome. World Food Programme has warned if the ongoing situation continues in Yemen, it will be hard for Yemeni families to survive. The World Food Programme added that it's running out of funds, which will force the organization to cut part of the food assistance in Yemen. According to the World Food Programme, this reduction came at the worst time for Yemeni citizens, who depend mainly on WFP meals to survive. The food crisis has contributed to the rise of the malnutrition rate in the country, accounting for 2.3 million children and nearly 1.2 million pregnant women. Currency devaluation and hyperinflation have also contributed to the food crisis, in which The economy in Yemen is keeping collapsing, which increases food prices and threatens food security for families in Yemen. This critical situation is unprecedented and is causing severe consequences upon Yemeni families, accounting for 13 million people who lack food provision. As a result, around 66% of Yemeni people had to reduce the number of meals eaten on a daily basis. Hunger catastrophe keeps threatening Yemeni people, not only in the short run, but also in the long run. So, till when would families in Yemen continue to suffer famine and lack of food aid?
Turning to the military developments, more than 40 Houthis were killed on the southern and western fronts of Ma'rib. According to sources, battles intensified between the government forces and the Houthi militia near the village of Al-Zud during the past hours. They said the government forces penetrated Houthi positions after launching a massive attack. The giant forces also thwarted Houthi attempts to infiltrate through mountain ranges and inflicted heavy losses on the group fighters. Government forces liberated sites south of Ma'rib from the Houthi militia. A military source said the units of the government forces launched an attack during which they managed to liberate Al-Radda and Al-Faliha. The attack resulted in the killing and injury of a number of Houthi elements, in addition to the destruction of a number of equipment. The joint forces inflicted human losses on the Houthi militia after a series of attacks on several fronts in Taz and Hudaydah west of Yemen. The military media of the joint forces reported that the artillery had directly hit sites and hideouts of the militias in Maqbana west of Taz and Al-Jarahi south of Hudaydah. Government forces shot down 2 drones in Harad north of Hajjah. Dozens of Houthi militia were killed and injured in battles with the government forces. Along that, the coalition targeted Houthi positions in Hajjah with a series of air raids, causing heavy losses in lives and equipment among the militia. 2 citizens were killed and 2 others were injured as a result of the missile attack launched by the terrorist Houthi militia on a house in Hajjah. Sources reported that a Houthi missile fell on a house in the village of Bani al-Zain, west of Hiram district.
A missile attack hit us while we were sleeping safely in our home. 2 people were killed and 2 others were wounded. They hit us with several missiles and we are such helpless civilians.
The government forces thwarted a Houthi attack on their positions northwest of Sada. Military sources said the government forces thwarted an attack launched by the Houthi militia on a number of mountains in Al Thabit area and inflicted heavy losses on the militia. Houthi militia targeted a camp for the displaced people with a shelling in Maqbana west of Taz. Sources confirmed that 4 children and a woman were seriously injured as a result of the Houthi shelling on the camp.
The criminal Houthi militia targeted this lady and her son in this area. We are displaced to this area and we were surprised by the shelling that fell on our heads.
In Taz, the Houthi militia targeted the eastern neighborhoods of the city. A citizen and 2 other children were slightly injured.
This morning, while we were sitting in our house, We heard a shelling that came from a security headquarters for the Houthis. We heard people screaming and we were surprised by the injury of this man, his children and his wife. The targeted area has no military activity. There are only civilians.
Coming next. Houthi militia continue to deplete education in Yemen and brainwash youth with their sectarian ideology.
هذا هو محل استهداف الحواث الذين استهدفوا المواطنين وهم نائمين. هذا هو الصاروخ. من الساعة 4 ما سمعنا الضربة من الحوثي في المخيم. هذا يعني استشهدوا أولاد عمي، هذا استشهدوا يعني أخواني كلهم، يعني شوف يعني الدم في الخيم. الدم في الخيم يعني في كل مكان، يعني رؤوسهم ما التقوش، الرأس ما التقاش، الرأس ما التقاش.
Welcome back. In Yemen, education is tangled. Houthi rebels are modifying the curriculum. Schools across Yemen have either become centers of sectarian ideologies or turned into military barracks. This report has more details.
Yemen has been mired in a civil war since late 2014, when the Houthi militia stormed several northern provinces and pushed the internationally recognized government out of the capital Sana'a. The war has killed tens of thousands, forced 4 million to flee, and pushed the country to the brink of famine. Education is one of the most affected sectors by the war. Millions of children were deprived from the right to education. Teachers are not getting paid. Schools are being bombarded and destroyed by the Houthi airstrikes and explosive devices. According to a recent report by the International Committee of the Red Cross, the war in Yemen has damaged and destroyed more than 2,500 schools across the country, depriving more than 2 million students from education. Moreover, in Houthi-controlled areas, many teachers have stopped teaching because their salaries have not been paid. According to a UNICEF report, over 2 million school children in Yemen are now out of school as poverty, conflict, and lack of opportunities disrupt their education. Also, 2/3 of teachers in Yemen have not received their regular salaries for more than 5 years now, which puts around 4 million additional children at risk of disrupted education or dropping out, as unpaid teachers quit teaching to find another financial source to provide for their families. Also, the deteriorating economic situation made it hard for parents to send their children to schools, as many cannot afford the costs of transportation or even stationery. Some parents even put their children to work in order to provide much-needed additional income for the family. However, the head of the education office in Midi said the efforts are continuing to support the educational process despite the heavy damages of schools. Children are the most affected during this conflict. Either they get deprived from their right to education, or even those who go to school, they get recruited by the Houthi militia to join their ranks. Houthis manipulate them through modifying the content and influencing the core curriculum of public schools, in line with their political ideologies, all as part of their competition to control the country.
The oil and domestic gas crisis in Aden fostered the black market after oil derivatives disappeared from private stations. This report has more details.
The suffocating oil derivatives crisis has expanded in the interim capital Aden and the liberated governorates due to the closure of most fuel stations as the Yemeni Petroleum Company failed to provide them with oil supplies. Commercial fuel stations and stations belonging to the Yemeni Oil Company have completely stopped selling operations, which led to the creation of a suffocating fuel crisis.
Frankly, we don't know the reasons behind the petrol and gas crisis. One week we find petrol available in the market, and the next week it disappears. We don't know if it is what they call the gas sellers, who gain millions from this trade, or a problem in the import method. We as a state are supposed to import oil through countries, but in the last period it seems like we are dependent on traders as our main source. People are suffering a lot due to the fluctuation of many things, not only the oil crisis. We hope things turn around in the coming period.
There are hundreds of cars parked near gas stations waiting for the arrival of gasoline, stressing that this crisis caused the expansion of the black market, as most citizens are forced to go to the black market in order to mobilize their cars and provide the most basic needs, especially for public transport drivers.
We're really fed up. We can't take it anymore. There is no gas, no petrol. Passengers keep fighting all the time, causing problems for increasing the transportation fees. But it's totally out of our hands. They increase the price of oil derivatives and accordingly we increase the fare. Everything is expensive. Schools, petrol and transportation. We really can't take it anymore.
Citizens complained of the rise in public transportation prices as a result of this crisis, which has caused great paralysis in the public transportation sector. Aden and other governorates continue to witness severe shortages in fuel after gas stations closed, which has multiplied the suffering of citizens who are looking for daily sustenance. People ask about the reasons for the continuing crisis of oil derivatives in Aden, hoping it would end soon.
Official sources confirmed the Saudi grant allocated to provide electricity fuel in some governorates was suspended 2 days ago. They explained that the suspension is due to the failure of the Yemeni government to transfer the allocated money that was scheduled to be paid for the shipment. The sources outlined that there are negotiations between the Yemeni and Saudi sides to continue the shipment. Musab and Faisal have been friends since childhood. They share a lot of common things like their love for raising animals. Even in the time of war, they continued to pursue their passion for animals. This report has more details.
Despite the unfavorable circumstances bearing down on them, shepherds Faisal and Musab still have kindness to spare. The two friends have shared a passion for raising animals since their childhood and have channeled their efforts into starting a business in which they raise and sell livestock and other animals. Pigeons, sheep, dogs, canaries, poultry, ducks, and sheep all roam their farm.
Musab, my friend, had a passion for raising animals since his childhood. He raises and sells dogs, but sometimes the young ones get sick. Our initial goal was to let the animals reproduce and sell their offspring, but we received little external support, so our business couldn't grow.
They are short of a yard to safely shelter their animals, and their livestock is exposed to the wildlife prowling the village, but they are in no shortage of predicaments. The prices of grains run incredibly high, the sheep are prone to catching diseases, and sometimes snakes slither into their space.
We raise livestock, but we don't have a yard. So, our livestock is at risk of being eaten by hyenas scattered in the areas. We need the support of humanitarian organizations so we can expand our business and raise and sell more animals. Disease has struck my livestock. I lost 4 of my sheep to a disease that was making its rounds. A snake infiltrated our space and ate some of our birds. We need humanitarian organizations to supply us with adequate spaces to raise our animals. We can't afford yards.
Faisal and Murad still cling to their passion in the face of adversaries, making it their mission to adopt animals and treat them with kindness.
The National Committee Against Coronavirus recorded 8 new cases of the pandemic. Committee officials said 43 recovered cases were recorded and 4 deaths. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 11,679, including 2,107 cases of deaths and 8,496 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The United Nations Security Council is to discuss Yemen crisis on Tuesday. The World Food Programme says that Yemen is on the brink of famine. Houthi militia targets a camp for displaced people in Taz. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.